They're with Green Top Planning Research, and we're working for the city on this exciting project. We appreciate you coming out this afternoon here. So we're going to kind of go through a PowerPoint presentation here, and then we have stations set up here afterwards. So feel free afterwards to break out. And if you have any additional questions, there's also a sign-in sheet in the back here, so if you could sign in on that, we'd really appreciate that too. And there's also a comment sheet here. So again, this is just the beginning stage. This is open house. The city's been working on this since the beginning of January here. And there's a technical advisor committee that also participates in this here too. So greatly appreciate you here and greatly looking forward to hearing your input tonight here too. So greatly appreciate it there. So just to kind of kick it off here, so the Creole node, this was originally, the city worked on this probably about 22 years ago, and there was an existing zoning on this property here. And, third speaker, yeah. So you can see up here what the zoning was on this area for about, it's been sitting in place for probably 20 to 22 years here. So nothing's really moved far as forward as, commercial opportunities in the area. It's kind of just been sitting dormant here. But over the year, the city continued to grow, and your populations continue to have more people coming in here. And what's happened is the city has a shortfall of commercial land and residential density here. And so the city has been working with our firm and the technical advisory committee looking at what the potential rezoning and opportunities could be for this area here. So really studying this, taking a look at, you have a shortfall of commercial land available in here, so that means the lack of grocery stores, hotels, all those things that you're really commuting back and forth to Salem, Independence, and other areas, right? So how do you look at your zoning within your city, within the urban growth boundary, and what are some beneficial ways of rezoning that, and how does that look at, right? So that's what we were hired to do. We came in to really look at this and work with the TAC committee there, right? So the La Creole node we know is next to the Barbary node right there on the right. That's the purple area. And then up on the left is the Wyatt node there. So on the right here is the current zoning for the La Creole node zoning there. You can see there's a little bit of general commercial in there. There's some residential low density. But the city overall has a tremendous amount of residential land available, right? So pretty much there's close to almost 700 acres of land available. That's within your city. So you're kind of becoming this bedroom community, right? Without commercial services, right? So how does that fit best within your community to try and have that balance of commercial and residential? And that's what we do. So we kind of come in and we work with the TAC committee here. Some of the first things we do is we look at what is your buildable land area? What is the slopes and contours? And what works best for larger blocks like a Fred Meyer's or opportunities that have some bigger commercial opportunities. And looking at some of those contour areas, you can see you have along Kings Valley area. That's a great opportunity to think about some commercial zoning coming into that area, right? We also look at the city's overall transportation plan. This is a plan that the city has for the next 10, 20 years, what the expectations of how this area is going to be built out in there. So you can see on the right, that's the city's long-term transportation plan and how those roads would kind of go through that area and service that area there. So we have what's called a technical advisory committee. On the right, you can see the members that are involved in the committee here. We continually meet with them. It's representation of people from your downtown, from other independent areas. For example, some of the planners from nearby adjacent cities that have seen growth challenges that have come in, transportation folks from the chariots. So we have a wide representation on this committee that kind of helps to shape and gives us feedback as we go through the concepts of looking at where commercial opportunities should be maybe rezoned, where there should be potential to think about higher density in certain areas. So, and how the streets could kind of flow from that aspect. How does transportation come into the community from that aspect there? So, they provide a lot of wisdom to us because they live in your community. They work in your community. They provide a lot of services here. So it's important to have the technical advisory committee providing that feedback as we go through the process here. with that, I'm going to turn to Matt, and he's going to go through the concepts that we looked at with the Technical Advisory Committee and talk about those too.
Okay, thanks, John. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out. It's not often that we actually get a lot of people coming out to open house events. So thanks for taking the time to be here and be concerned about what we're talking about here. As John mentioned earlier, the planning for the Creole node is really, it's planning, it's looking at what could happen over the next 20 years. You have a plan that's been in place for a while. Not a lot has happened with that. So this is a look at it again to update it based on a couple of things that the city has been looking at over the past few years. So the city did what's called a housing needs analysis, and that housing needs analysis identified a need for more middle density residential land. As John mentioned, you've got a lot of residential land, but probably some of it needs to be for middle density. So things like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, cottage clusters, things like that. The second thing that the city did is it did what's called an economic opportunity analysis. So the economic opportunity analysis looks at your local economy, how it's growing, what industries are growing, which ones are getting smaller, and it tries to figure out over the next 20 years how much land you need for those employment uses. And what it found is something that we heard from members of the Technical Advisory Committee, and some things that probably many of you who are here tonight would readily recognize, and that is you've used up a lot of the land that you have for commercial development. And so there are other commercial uses. You can think of restaurants, services, hotel, things like that, grocery store, as John mentioned, that could come to Dallas. At least we think so based on the work that was done with the economic opportunity analysis, but there's just not the land available. And so one of the things that we wanted to look at with all of these scenarios was adding some more land that could be developed for these kinds of commercial purposes. So with those things in mind and a few others, we developed 3 kind of preliminary scenarios. All of these scenarios provide more commercial land than is currently available in the city of Dallas and is currently designated in the Creole node. So the Creole node right now is only planned to have about 20 acres of commercial land. The study that I was just talking about estimates that Dallas could use about 94 acres of commercial land, sort of citywide. And the Creole node provides an opportunity to find some of that commercial land. So what we're suggesting here in these 3 scenarios is that more land be dedicated to commercial development, be made available for commercial development. And so for the first scenario here, scenario 1, we're able can't hit that 94 acres that you need, but we get a lot closer to it with about 80 acres. So that's available. This scenario is the only scenario that has any low density in it. The other 2 scenarios have only medium, high density residential land. And in this case, the purpose of that is to provide a buffer kind of along the edge of the city, particularly in areas that we don't think are going to develop very quickly. So around Oak Villa, for example, it's right at the edge of the urban growth boundary. It's unlikely to develop very quickly over time. So that remains lower density. And then also looking then, this time at land on the south side of Ellendale, where right now you have a lot of single-family development. It's a high-traffic road. It's only going to continue to become more heavily trafficked. At some point in time, those properties are probably going to redevelop and redevelop for something that is a more intensive kind of use. So over time, we see that happening. And so all of these scenarios look at that transition away from single-family to something that's more like commercial. And I'll move, where's the, oh, just, yep, thanks. Okay, moving on to the second scenario. More commercial land in this one than scenario 2021 with nearly 90 acres. But again, sort of roughly the same kind of configuration, no single family out at the edges, just medium and higher density. The higher density all kind of in and around the planned commercial areas so that there's ready access to services, restaurants, things like that. Also to your recreational facilities that you have existing within the city right now, as well as educational facilities, schools, and so forth. One feature that you'll notice is common to all of these is a central green space. This is something that the existing plan has. So it's in our proposed concepts, it's about 7 acres of green space. Could be a park, it could be an event space or something like that. That's something that the city will want to look at moving forward, as this gets decided. But it's right in the middle of the node. It provides kind of a link between recreational facilities that you have further south on the Creole Drive, going all the way down to the pathway system along Creole Creek. And then hopefully connecting all the way up to Kings Valley and to the neighborhoods that are on the other side of Kings Valley. And then moving on to, to scenario 4. Scenario 4 is kind of the synthesis of discussions that we had with the Technical Advisory Committee. It is what we think is likely to be the preferred scenario that will go through the rest of the process. And so this is a public process where you'll have Planning Commission. They will have study sessions and public hearings, make a recommendation to City Council. City Council will have study sessions, public hearings, things like that. And then eventually it gets adopted into your comprehensive plan. So after the Technical Advisory Committee part of this process has been concluded, there's still a whole bunch more that happens that allows for public involvement. So we're glad that you're all here. Leave your name, email if you want updates on what's happening so you keep track of this and continue to participate in the process over time. And so with this final scenario, which is, we're thinking more or less the preferred scenario, you have about 90 acres of commercial land, again, trying to get to that 94 acres that we believe is needed. You'll notice there's this kind of turquoise blue area on the south side of Ellendale. We're calling that mixed use. Mixed use in this case really means you could have vertical mixed use where you have a storefront on the first floor of a multi-story building, or it could be horizontal mixed use where within that neighborhood you have commercial as well as residential uses. So it's not just that kind of verticalized mixed use, it's just spread out in a neighborhood that offers goods and services to people who live there as well as the people who live in existing neighborhoods surrounding this area. So they'll be able to walk over to a coffee shop or something like that, maybe a small convenience store. Okay, and what's that? Yeah. And finally, one of the things that we looked at in kind of designing the node and thinking about how everything is connected is how the node itself is connected to other places within the city of Dallas. And so on La Creole Drive, for example, we recognize that there might be a need for better active transportation facilities, things like bike lanes, sidewalks, things of that nature, to connect those areas where people are going to be living and working with schools and recreational facilities. So in looking at the design of the node, that's one of the things that we considered. So there's a proposed multi-use path that would connect that mixed-use area, that blue area, up to the part of the node that's on the north side of Ellendale. And speaking of Ellendale, so that was another important consideration. Right now in your transportation system plan, Ellendale is planned to be a 5-lane facility, a 5-lane road. You may be relieved or not to know that ODOT doesn't have that funded right now. A 5-lane facility in this particular case is maybe more than you need would require the acquisition of a lot of right-of-way and things like that. So as you are, as a community, updating your transportation system plan, which will be happening soon, that's something that I think you definitely want to consider and pay real close attention to as you have public meetings with your planning commission and your city council when you're updating that transportation system plan. But we do recognize that Ellendale is going to become more and more heavily trafficked over time as the city of Dallas grows. And that affects what kind of land uses go on the north and the south side of Ellendale. So.
Now we have Nikki show them up.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Nikki Hart-Brinkley, and I make the maps. So it's my job to take all of these ideas that the planners have incorporated with what the TAC has taught us about your community, as well as later incorporating your ideas and your needs about the future of your city. So I have the most fun job because I get to make the maps and I get to communicate what different types of plans are possible in your community. And one of the ways that I do that, let me switch over here, is by creating basically what's called a website hub. And so for those of you who really want to take a deep dive into some of this, because we're going to throw a lot of information out at you, but we want to make sure that everything that we're doing from every stage of the planning process to taking a deep dive into why we are trying to help you make the decisions that we're helping with, that all of that is really transparent. And so we go into a deep dive on this hub site. You'll see there's a landing page here that talks about, well, first of all, you know already about the open house. But it gets into some of the background. So John has talked a little bit about what the background of the La Creole node is, but this tells you a little bit more information about the history of the node, what the goals are, and the area that we're studying. It also includes interactive maps, which if you're comfortable working with, you can spin around and look at all the area and see what current zoning is. You can click on properties and get more information, see if you're in the planned zone or not. So it really gives you a deep dive into how this might impact you and your family and your friends. There's also documents and links, and of course the city website is the main area that you're going to want to go to for information, but this should be linked on the city website. But I also include some documents and links here, as well as things that are in the news, timelines, and contact information. You'll also see that I've added recently the technical memo. And so the technical memo is the first document that we present to you, kind of bringing all of the information together, which both John and Matt have lightly touched on. But I have linked here the full document, and so you can really take a deep dive into all of this information and all of the work that we've done so far. We also talk in depth here about the conceptual designs. Your Wi-Fi is a little bit slower here than I'm used to. Loading. Do y'all remember when you all had AOL email and it looked like this? I'm having a little throwback here. So this is the previous La Creole conceptual plan. And then this goes into the draft conceptual designs. And Matt went into numbers 1 and 3, and 4 as well. But you might have noticed that we skimmed over concept plan 2. That got scrapped pretty early on. But if you're interested in seeing kind of how that looked and what the acreage was for each of the proposed areas, you can get more information there. So it goes into concept plans 3 and 4 here. And then it shows a bigger map of that connectivity. So that is the plan that connects the La Creole area with all of your great existing trail system. And again, we get into a deep dive with conceptual plan 4. So this is where, again, you can go and you can navigate around the interactive map. You can click on things and determine how you are situated within that concept 4 plan. Some information about the first TAC meeting survey and some of the feedback we got there. And then this kind of goes into those existing conditions. John and Matt touched on this a bit, where this is the existing the previous node boundary, and this is the expanded area. This is where the other nodes are located within context to La Creole. We look at the comprehensive plan designations and the La Creole zoning area. And we look at some of those environmental conditions that can impact development. So we look at things like slopes over 25%. We look at something called SLIDO, which is the state landslide susceptibility layer. And so I look at all of those things in context and make sure there's nothing very impactful to potential development. And again, here's your transportation plan. So this is your current transportation plan. And if we go back to the landing page, you'll also see where you can freeze the screen. You can provide information directly back to the planning team by filling out a survey. So this is where you can provide all kinds of feedback about what you think about where we're at so far, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see happen in your area in the future. And so that's my tour through the hub site. I'd encourage you to get in there, take a look, take a deep dive, read through Technical Memo 1. It's full of good information that I know you'll be interested in.
Well, thank you, Nikki, Matt. And again, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We have some stations set up back here, so happy to take any questions. If you want to, stop at one of the tables here and talk to us. I'm going to let Charlie kind of talk about kind of our timing. We started in January working on this. We'll be working on this over the next 3 to 4 months with public comment and going through that process. But Charlie from the city, and again, the city's been very proactive at looking at this and working on this, so greatly appreciate it.
Right, thanks, John. So as John mentioned, we're just partway into this process. This is meant to be a long-term process, a long-term plan. I really want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank the members of the Technical Advisory Committee who've given up their time to help guide us from a citizen perspective to get us to this point. Again, as John and Matt mentioned, this is part of a long, ongoing land use process. It will go to the Planning Commission for public hearings. It will go to the City Council for public hearings. So this is certainly nothing has been decided as of tonight. We're looking at the community's future. We're trying to honor the City Council's vision to create development in this part of the community that historically has not seen a lot of development. As was mentioned earlier, we're in short supply of commercial land, and that equates a lack of commercial opportunities for the community. So we're kind of hamstrung at the current moment. So there'll be, we're still months away, from formally adopting anything. We haven't set firm dates on exactly when the Planning Commission is going to hear this. We haven't set firm dates on when the City Council will hear this, but we're literally months into the future. The Technical Advisory Committee is scheduled to meet at least one more time in the next month or so to kind of review the comments and feedback that have been gathered from tonight's meeting. Again, I would encourage you to sign up if you haven't done so already, so you can continue to receive information. I'm just curious though, how many of you are here tonight because you received a direct mail correspondence from the city? How many of you are here because you saw it on the internet somewhere? And the rest of you, did you hear it from a friend, a coworker, a newspaper? Okay, thank you. So we did have some in the newspaper. So we tried our best to get it out there in a variety of different ways. I know it's virtually impossible these days to reach everybody all the time, but we try to do that, and it's evidenced, I think, here tonight. We have a great turnout, and I appreciate you all taking some time to hear what's going on. So that's a little bit about kind of where we're going, where we've been, and kind of why we're here. So I think the best way to move forward, John, as John mentioned, we do have these stations. There's feedback forms, so if you have to go or you don't have time to get your question answered by a human, tonight, you can fill out one of those forms and we'll get back to you at another time. So, do you want to we're just going to break up now? All right, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 stations. Maybe we can do a fifth up here if we have enough people to cover everything. And we'll do our best to answer your questions. We may not have answers to every question you have tonight, but again, we can do our best to get back to you if you provide us your information. Yes, sir.
Has there been any environmental studies done north of the environmental impact studies?
By environmental impact, you mean
Wildlife, wildlife.
not to my knowledge. Looking around, some of the other experts in the room.
Those won't happen until development's proposed. Right now, you're just looking at zoning layers. So environmental impact statements happen when post-development occur. So those will come in the future if needed.
Yes.
Two quick things. One, in your experience, when you say this is a long-term process, put some time to that. I know that a lot of things have to happen. What does that mean?
Well, most of it's going to be developer-driven. However, the city will do some initial leading by putting needed infrastructure into this area, notably wastewater sewer that has not been serving this area. That project is due to kick off like what, next year, Tom? So within the next 12 months or so, 12 to 18 months, we'll be extending city wastewater up Hawthorne and into this area. So that may or may not kickstart some of the development, but we believe that some of the development has been hamstrung due to the lack of sewer in the area. But the city's not flush with cash to go advance build a lot of infrastructure in the area. So it's going to develop as development occurs. We're just trying to lay the groundwork on paper, literally with land use, to allow that development to occur.
How many years do you think you're looking at with this even building out to any significant degree?
It's really hard to say because we don't have any good local models in Dallas of this scale that's something other than residential.
And the second thing is, I did look at the hub page on the city website. I may have missed it, but is there a link there to what we just looked at here?
Yeah, it's on the economic development section.
A link to the hub site or a link from the hub site?
The city website has a hub page
Yes.
for the Black Creole node.
And it takes you to this site.
No, it didn't.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if all this stuff, which I was looking for,
Yes.
is linked on that page.
It should be.
So where is it?
It should be. I have to show you.
Yeah, what?
All right.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
All right.
We all like to know that.
Okay. Well, we can walk through that in a minute then.
Does this become an eminent domain situation, or how do you handle?
So the question was about eminent domain, and I assume you refer to the taking of property for development.
Yeah.
There's no plans to do that. That's a political decision. The council would have to decide that. I don't think there's a lot of appetite or a precedent for that in this community, but there may be cases where that makes sense. But again, that's a city council decision.
Because somebody has laid on land that is private.
Well, certainly, almost all of this land is privately owned. The city has, no interest or no plans to acquire the property in this area for development.
Pretty much half of it built that highway. Plan of 5 lane Elkdale is going to be the highway.
Correct, and that's a state highway.
Right.
Right. So that would be up to ODOT in that case.
Do we have water for all these grand plans?
Do we have water for all these grand plans?
Yeah.
Yes. The short answer is yes, and there are plans in the works to address the more longer-term community-wide water issue with the expansion of Mercer Reservoir, and that will be happening, in the next several years. So what did you just do there?
I just walked over.
You got it, right? There you go. Thank you.
It has
Thank
everything
you.
there, you'll find it there.
Thank you. I knew there was a way to do it because I've done it, but I couldn't tell you. I had to show you.
If we search that, we probably will find Rocky Node National.
Yeah,
Something's gonna
if you
come up
search,
somewhere.
yeah, if you do a Google search for like Creole Node Master Plan Hub, it'll come up in
Sure.
Google search.
We'll also make it more evident on our webpage. We'll have a link to it right on the homepage of our website. We'll make it easier.
All right, so let's break off into stations and we'll man the stations